Okay, let's take a look here. Current blood sugar is at 8.4, which is okay. I'm fully calibrated. This little one here is saying, hey, you're one day out from needing to change my sensor, which I'm going to have to do. And if you touch that one day, it says in 23 hours, I'll have to change my sensor. So hopefully I can have a good sleep tonight and get up in the morning and change my sensor. Active insulin is 1.025 units left. And you can see that correction value this morning has been quite active. So it's trying to keep me below and keep me within range, which is awesome. I had two kind of sort of lows last night. So average sugar here. Now we're at 54%. You see that little red mark showing up? This is what it looks like. 43% time in range, 54% in range, 3% below. Now 1% counts for 15 minutes. So this is 45 minutes. I was below 3.8. Average sugar is 9.6. So that's a lot. So we have to try to make sure I don't go low again. And about 10 millimoles, above 10 was 43. This is what's up. Today's video is called Diabetics Against the World. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. This channel is provided for informational purposes only. Contact your physician for any diagnostic or treatment plan. So, when I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, it wasn't called type 1 diabetes. That name has sort of evolved. It went first that diabetes mellitus, then it was juvenile onset, and then it kind of morphed from that into type 1 insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. Then there was type 2. The point is, you were kind of told what you had to do, and then you were expected to live it. If you didn't, oh my God, you're cheating. You're doing everything. You were expected to be the perfect diabetic. And if you weren't, you would get so much from doctors, nurses, parents, that, if you only took care of yourself, if you only ate what you had to eat, you couldn't enjoy anything. I can remember going out for a birthday dinner and one of my parents saying, oh, well, you can't have any cake. But everyone else could have my cake, but I couldn't. Trust me, the next year things change. But you have to deal with things. And so often, newly diagnosed diabetics feel that they're the only ones out there. Now, when I was diagnosed, that was more true than not. And since then, we have learned and we have grown. Now, anyone who's diagnosed may have to spend 3, 4 days in the hospital, probably at the most. But when they get out, they are seen ongoing by a registered nurse who's also a diabetic educator and an endocrinologist. It's kind of like the difference is mind blowing. When I was there, when I went into the hospital, I was in the hospital for good close to 4 weeks. My whole time there was learning how to do shots, and I talked about my endocrinologist at the time and how he yelled at me. But, I think he was getting close to retirement anyway, and he wasn't interested in treating a new diabetic, especially a teenager. After I got out of the hospital, I never saw him again. I never saw an endocrinologist again. It wasn't till I graduated from high school that I started to see an endocrinologist. While in high school, it was a boys' private school at the time. It's now co-ed, but I saw an endo one visit, and that was it. Okay. Sorry, Shayna. But on the whole, you were expected to know everything and do everything. I was probably the last person that should have been given the keys to the car. And what I mean by that is being left alone to get my care routine. Now, you have the care of your family, and a lot of the families were supportive. My dad was busy making a living, and that's fine. My mom played part in developing me until her and my stepdad went to Fiji for, I think it was 3 years. And I was left with my sister, who was a strict, you have one thing more than you were supposed to, and everything hit the fan. But that's no way to bring up a child to learn. I've talked, the next point, I've talked about it a number of times, and we have to live up to everyone else's expectation, regardless of what, what your doctor has said. Oh, you got diabetes from eating too much sugar. No, I know that's the only reason you got it, and you shouldn't have been eating all that sugar. Well, I didn't eat that much sugar. Based on the other kids in the neighborhood, I didn't have that much extra. And then you'd hear stories, and the stories weren't kind of, oh, well, you could do it. My grandmother did it. So, oh, my grandmother went blind. Oh, my grandmother lost a leg. A young teenage boy who's having to deal with a life-threatening condition. Now, I didn't know it was life-threatening, and it probably the best thing. It wasn't up there with cancer, but if you didn't get things going right, it could be long-term problems. I had some negative experiences early on, and as such, I started down a path of where I necessarily did not take care of myself. Oh, God. And that wasn't anyone else's fault. That was mainly up here. I know better. And my life as an adult at diabetes really kind of started with a doctor I had. My kind of first real endocrinologist who I saw on an ongoing basis. And that was Dr. John Hunt. He was an excellent doctor. And he was kind of like the old English grandfather type, or by the time I met him. But he gave me excellent things to learn from and to grow with. So I think that was sort of my first time growing with an endocrinologist, and sort of that's where my knowledge of diabetes started. But I went and got a job. We had moved to the east side of Vancouver. I started getting a job and working. It was graveyards, which was terrible. I got into my diabetes was always in the back seat. I knew it was there, but I just would run high blood sugars. I'd go home, I'd crash. I'd have the ambulance over to my house because blood sugar was low. And at no point was it ever sort of said, well, maybe you need to go and get into a group. And I'm talking a support group. I had searched one out, and I just saw it on a bulletin board saying diabetes. And we'd come, and it started out being, you went there, they had coffee and tea, and you sit there and you shoot the gab. And then eventually got, well, let's have a bowling night. So we go out bowling. And that lasted, and eventually that kind of petered out. And then I got a hold of a new endocrinologist. There were a few years. And I met her while in the hospital. And she really kind of let me know that there are other people out there with type 1 diabetes. I wasn't the only one. And there were a few times I met up with other diabetics, and you start feeling a camaraderie. And I think the camaraderie helped. I know I keep saying in the hospital. For years I was in and out of the hospital. But a couple of other diabetics came down from why do I want to say Princeton? But it was up in sort of the interior. And we hung out, and I had some great friends. And we grabbed another lady who husband was a big sports caster of one of the local radio stations. And I met a celebrity who, I know, it's pathetic, I know, but, and I really started to learn. Now, that is why I say if you have a younger diabetic, get them into a teen group of diabetics. There are some out there. If not, talk to your doctor. Let them see there are other people coping with what they have. This way, they can start feeling they're not alone and it's not them against the whole race out there, the whole human race, the whole world. So, get them interested. Don't make them feel sort of they're all alone. Because of the social aspect, you will find they will get better control. Because we all want to be like our friends. And with that, have a super day, and we'll talk again too soon. Bye now. Just one little aside. I forgot to mention this, that as soon as I shut off the camera, it popped into my head. And that is groups together, you learn so much more. And when I was growing up, diabetics I met were always type 2. They were never a type 1. And you really have to have other type 1s so they don't feel so alone. I can remember going to diabetic groups, and I was the only type 1. Everything else was catered to them, and then it was to be, oh yeah, Mike, you don't do that, you do this. I was always felt like a second, which wasn't good. And with that, it's now the end. We'll talk again tomorrow. Bye now. My email is mikesdiabetesworld@gmail.com. mikesdiabetesworld@gmail.com.